You can't see it, you can't measure it on a checklist. It doesn't leave a bruise or a scar. But it's one of the most dangerous hazards on any job site: mental fatigue. In the world of workplace safety, we've trained ourselves to look for what's obvious: unguarded machinery, fall hazards, toxic exposure. But some of the most serious incidents have been caused not by visible risks, but by a tired mind, a moment of cognitive fog, or a split-second delay in reaction time. In this episode, we're going to look at how mental fatigue silently compromises safety, and how it can lead to life-altering or even fatal mistakes. We'll explore real incidents, dig into what the science tells us about brain function under stress, and lay out what both workers and organizations can do to protect against this invisible threat. Let's start with a story. It's a freezing winter morning at a northern sawmill. A long-haul shift worker, just finishing a grueling 10-day rotation, is operating a high-capacity log stacker. He hasn't slept properly in days. He's been nodding off between loads, brushing it off as just needing another coffee. But today, his timing is just a second off. 1 second too slow to stop the log cradle from swinging wide. A stack collapses. Another worker, a yard tech doing an inspection just feet away, doesn't see it coming. The logs crush him before anyone can react. The operator hadn't been drinking. He knew the protocol. He'd done this job 100 times, but his brain had reached a limit, and nobody saw it coming. Most people at that mill remember the moment for the sound, the crash, the panic, the shouting. But behind it was a human factor: fatigue. Investigators later confirmed that mental and physical exhaustion contributed directly to the errors that led to the fatal collapse at the mill. Mental fatigue doesn't just happen overnight, it builds, slowly, quietly, shift after shift, thought after thought. It's the weight of prolonged stress, poor sleep, long hours, emotional strain, and relentless decision-making. Inside the brain, several key changes start to unfold when fatigue sets in. The part of the brain responsible for judgment, focus, and impulse control, the prefrontal cortex, begins to slow down. Our reaction times lengthen. In fact, studies have shown that staying awake for just 17 hours straight can impair performance as much as a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. That's the equivalent of mild intoxication, without a single drop of alcohol. Memory also starts to slip. Instructions blur, steps get skipped, hazards go unnoticed. And perhaps most dangerously, our confidence often stays high even as our ability plummets. We think we're okay when we're not. That disconnect between perceived performance and actual capacity is one of the biggest dangers in fatigue-related incidents. People don't always recognize that their judgment is off until it's too late. Let's look at other cases. Starting in a small prairie farming town, a combine operator was finishing his 16th hour in the field during harvest season. The sun had set and the dew had started to form. Visibility was low and exhaustion had set in. Still, he kept going, feeling the pressure of weather windows, yield goals, and expectations. As he turned the machine toward the final swath, he misjudged the alignment by just a few feet. The header clipped a fuel line from a nearby temporary refuel station. Within seconds, the misted diesel ignited and a fire engulfed the machinery. He made it out with burns, but barely. The fire response team later confirmed that fatigue was a significant contributing factor. The operator had worked nearly 100 hours that week, sleeping in his truck between shifts. The fire wasn't due to faulty equipment, it was the consequence of one miscalculated turn, and a mind running on empty. In a regional transit system, a city bus driver was nearing the end of a 12-hour split shift. He had only a few hours of rest between the morning and afternoon runs, and had been stuck in back-to-back traffic for most of the day. As he approached an intersection, his eyes briefly closed, just for a second. That moment of microsleep caused him to miss a red light. The resulting collision involved 3 vehicles and sent 2 passengers to the hospital. Thankfully, no one died, but the driver never returned to the job. He later shared that he'd been afraid to report his fatigue for fear of being replaced on the shift list. And then there was the utility line worker in a major urban center. It was his 8th consecutive day on call. The emergency storm schedule had crews working long hours restoring power after a major wind event. Late into the evening, while repositioning an aerial lift bucket to replace a transformer fuse, he clipped a live conductor. The resulting arc flash caused severe burns and temporary blindness. Post-incident analysis revealed that the operator had been awake for over 20 hours and was on his 3rd emergency call-out of the day. These incidents weren't caused by inexperience or negligence. They were caused by depleted minds in high-risk situations. Fatigue, once again, showing up not in someone's words, but in their delayed reaction time and diminished hazard awareness. In 2010, A technician at a mining operation in Chile fell asleep at the controls of a crushing machine. He had worked 3 consecutive 12-hour night shifts. There was no formal fatigue monitoring policy. The machinery kept running. No one caught the error until hours later, after a conveyor backed up, jammed, and tore through an adjacent control room. 2 workers were injured, one seriously. The cause? Not faulty equipment, not a gap in the safety protocol, but a human brain pushed beyond its limits. Fatigue is rarely a standalone issue. It's a symptom of deeper systemic forces. Poor scheduling, unrealistic workloads, and organizational cultures that reward pushing through at all costs. In some workplaces, saying you're exhausted is seen as weak, or worse, uncommitted. That mindset doesn't just burn people out. It creates the perfect storm for disaster. Scientific studies continue to support this reality. Workers who get less than 6 hours of sleep a night are more than 70% more likely to be involved in an incident. Night shift workers, particularly those on rotating schedules, face double the risk for serious errors, especially in the early morning hours between 2 and 6 a.m., when the human body is naturally at its lowest alertness. Fatigue doesn't always come from lack of sleep. It can be triggered by mental strain, constant multitasking, emotional stress, decision fatigue, and information overload. The more a person is stretched thin cognitively, the more likely they are to miss something critical, even if they technically feel awake. Think about your own day. Have you ever reached a point where you reread the same sentence 5 times and still don't remember it? Have you ever driven home and forgotten the entire trip? That's fatigue at work. And now let's pause for a moment, because this isn't just about stories and studies. It's about you. When was the last time you caught yourself zoning out at work mid-task? Do you remember how many hours of sleep you got last night? Have you gone days, maybe weeks, without a real break, thinking it's just what the job demands? When's the last time someone at work asked how you were doing and genuinely meant it? This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. Fatigue doesn't just sneak in when we're careless, it builds up when no one's paying attention. And the first step in preventing it is noticing it. It numbs the brain, it erodes awareness, and in high-risk workplaces, it can be deadly. Warning signs of fatigue often masquerade as mood changes or small performance slips. People become irritable, distracted, withdrawn. They start forgetting steps or misjudging timing. They miss hazards that would have been obvious hours earlier. They have close calls, near misses that never make it into reports. These signs aren't flaws, they're symptoms, and they should be treated as seriously as any frayed wire or cracked scaffold. So what do we do about it? At the organizational level, it starts with design, shift design, task design, and expectation design. Are workers being rotated off high-focus tasks regularly? Is there enough recovery time built into the schedule between shifts? Are back-to-back overtime requests becoming the norm instead of the exception? Some companies have begun implementing fatigue risk management systems, structured programs that include regular check-ins, cognitive assessments, and real-time fatigue monitoring. But even without a high-tech system, there are steps anyone can take. Supervisors can begin every morning briefing by simply asking, "Who's running on low sleep today?" Followed by, "How can we adjust the day to keep each other safe?" These aren't just wellness check-ins, they're hazard assessments. And sometimes the best intervention is a one-on-one check-in. A good supervisor doesn't wait for someone to fall apart, they notice the signs. "Hey, I noticed you've been working doubles 3 days in a row. You okay to stay on this task? Or do we need to reassign?" Or maybe it's a quieter moment, just 2 people on break, and the foreperson says, "It's not about pushing through, it's about making sure no one ends up getting hurt." We've all been there. These moments aren't dramatic, but they matter. They give permission, they open the door. And in workplaces where fatigue is normal, they can be the difference between a near miss and a real tragedy. At the individual level, we also need to shift how we think. Getting sleep isn't a luxury, it's a safety measure. Taking breaks isn't laziness, it's prevention. If your body is your most valuable tool on the job, then rest is maintenance, and maintenance is part of the job. Here's another real-world example. In 2018, an ER nurse in the United States administered the wrong medication during a 14-hour shift. She had skipped her last break, trying to help with a staffing shortage. The error nearly killed a patient. The aftermath was brutal, an investigation, a damaged career, a shaken team. But what stood out was this. The facility had no limits on shift lengths and provided no training on fatigue risk. The nurse wasn't negligent. She was running on empty. And no one had built a system to stop that from happening. We have to start viewing fatigue the same way we view any other workplace exposure, If a worker was exposed to toxic fumes, we wouldn't tell them to tough it out. We'd give them ventilation, PPE, and time to recover. So why do we treat cognitive exhaustion as a badge of honor instead of a red flag? Here's something to consider. The next time you walk a job site or step into a shift, don't just ask, is the floor dry? Or is the equipment inspected? Ask, are the people here mentally sharp? Are they rested, supported, and in the right headspace to make safe decisions? Because all the safety systems in the world won't help if the human system is shutting down. We can't eliminate fatigue entirely, but we can recognize it, we can talk about it, we can plan for it, and we can create a culture where saying, I need a break isn't a weakness, it's a strategy. Because in the end, a clear mind isn't optional in safety, it's essential. Coming up next, we'll dive into the human side of prevention, what a culture of care looks like, and how empathy, trust, and psychological safety can transform not just morale, but performance. Until then, stay alert, stay connected, and above all, stay safe.